Good afternoon. It's Jill McCartney with the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber for Northwest Now, and we're here today with Wayland Cubit, who is a candidate for Oklahoma County Sheriff. Hi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Well, thank you for so much for having me here and joining you today via Zoom. I love the connectivity that we are able to do this so quickly and so fast. But my name is Wayland Cubit, and I'm a lieutenant with the Oklahoma City Police Department currently. I've been a police officer for 24 years, and I'm currently running for Oklahoma County Sheriff. And I think that it's just a fascinating time, a very challenging time in law enforcement, obviously. But for me, those challenges actually mean opportunity. And so I'm actually one that can reimagine and reshape how law enforcement ought to be serving our community. I'm actually now listening differently to our community as they voice concerns for criminal justice reform and the way criminal justice reform ought to be. And I want to be a responsible voice in that. And so not only am I listening with my ears like I've done for my entire 24 years, but this moment, the moment that we're in right now between our community and our police, has me listening with my heart. And so what I'm hearing and understanding now is that the community wants policing no longer to be warriors in our community. They want guardians of our community, right? And so I feel that, I understand that, I believe in that. And so that's the reason why I'm asking people to take a real good, serious look at my campaign, my experience, my knowledge, and my skill. And I'll be honored to have their vote on November the 3rd.
For a long, long time, the jail and management of it was under the jurisdiction of the sheriff, and that has recently shifted. Do you think that was a good move or not? And if it could be reversed, do you think that would make sense?
Right. So the whole time we've had that jail, it has been managed by the sheriff, and it has always been a handful. It has always been a problem. And so I actually thought creating a trust where you had 9 people working together to try to bring fair, consistent, and humane treatment of our citizens in that jail to some sort of order. And so I was really celebrating that and was really kind of frustrated. The sheriff was resisting trying to make that trust be successful. And so I do not want it to go back the way it is. I would love to see how 9 people working together, a team of people working together, could work to be able to bring that to some kind of place where we can all be proud of. But here's the deal. We know that there are some structural issues in the jail that are just going to make it really, really difficult for them to be as successful as I like them to see. And so I would love to still be involved in the day-to-day operation of that jail to see what we can do to kind of convince the voters that we need, at some point, we're going to need a new jail.
What do you see as the role that the sheriff's office should play moving forward, and how would you utilize the resources, both manpower and physical resources and time, if you're a sheriff?
Right. So half of the resources stayed with the jail. Right. It takes a lot of manpower to operate the jail. And then a certain amount of about 147 employees stayed with the sheriff's office. And so the sheriff is responsible for the entire county. There's more than 19 agencies, West City, Oklahoma City, Dale City, blah, 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 all through the county that the sheriff's department is responsible for backup resources should any one of those cities need it. But there's also 150 miles of unincorporated Oklahoma County that the office of the sheriff has to patrol and responsible for their core services, right? And so that's still a lot of weight to be lifted, and not a lot of people to be able to do it. So we really just have to look at what resources we have to best be able to serve and respond to crime. Crime in the 150 miles of that unincorporated Oklahoma County has actually increased since 2016. Right. And that's probably because of lack of resources. That's probably because we haven't had the visibility and the manpower to be able to adequately patrol those areas. And so as sheriff, I'll be looking to figure out how we can provide better service, especially in the unincorporated areas where they have no other backup. That's the only policing they have is the sheriff department.
Smaller municipalities rely on those backup resources from the sheriff's office a lot more. A lot of our areas are changing from suburban to really having more of a traditional urban makeup. How could you help with that?
Right. So one of the hats that I wear, not only at the police department, but just across our community, is teaching implicit bias and cultural intelligence. And one of the things that I would hope to see at the sheriff department as me as their leader is that we've begun to be the leader in making sure implicit bias training is taught on a yearly basis and then retrained throughout the county, right? So I would love to be leaders in training in that. And we're not talking about just race. We're talking about age. We're talking about gender. We're talking about religion, on and on and on, because we all have biases on all sorts of those things. And so what I want our officers to do, not just at the sheriff's department, but the entire law enforcement community, is to be able to identify what our biases are and to make sure that those biases are not affecting our daily decisions. And so what we're talking about is in police administration is we're really talking about our hiring, right? Identifying who we see as viable candidates to not only come into our different agencies and departments, but who do we promote and how do we promote them and what roles they play in our decision making. So a lot of the times we make biased decisions because we don't have perspective, right? We don't have the right voices at the table. And then sometimes we give people voices at the table. We might have a lady or a female come into our administration table, but we don't give them voice. You hear it said that sometimes we invite people to our table, we don't let them eat. But with training, we're training and retraining on that training and scenario-based training, that we can eliminate that from happening and we can create a really diverse and inclusive administration and law enforcement across the county.
What are some things that you as a community leader would be doing to help our community avoid those kind of situations? And when they happen, what can be done?
So one of the things I'm really, really proud of is at my agency, although I'm assigned to the Police and Community Relations Unit, and I've created a couple of different community outreach programs and youth programs and diversion programs for youth over the years. And through those years, I kind of become a liaison from the community and our agency. And so when we came across this, let's call it the George Floyd moment in our country, I'm really, really proud that my community and my department leaned on me to use the relational equity that I had to be able to create dialogue, meaningful dialogue about what to do next, right? And how to communicate peaceful protest, how to create space where people can be heard by leaders who actually can make a decision. And so I said all that to answer your question this way, is that you cannot deal with crisis like that if you do not have relationship long before the crisis. And so I've already have those relationships in our county, and I would look to increase those relationships before we ever have a crisis, right? Because soon as we have, and it's not if we're going to have a crisis, it's just when, right? When we do have a crisis, the first thing that we have to lean on is our relationships. And we have to have leaders who have done things with people, had successes with people, celebrated with people, and we've also sat in the room and digest our failures together, right? And so that's what leaders do. They show up, they listen, even when it's uncomfortable, right? And they do that in times of peace, so they have the equity, the relational equity to draw from in a crisis. And so that's one of my gifts, and that's one of the things that I will be doing this year.
Trust that's built up. It takes time.
It takes time. It takes time. Right.
You know, some of the aspects of our community that are growing in different ways are people coming here from all over, from Asian and South America and some from Mexico, but many different languages. What are some ways that you can see working to bring people together and building those type of relationships from the spot that you would be serving in?
Yeah, I have to recognize where I am relationally empty. Like I have to look down my relationship circle to see what's not there, right? And there are so many, like you said, diverse groups and people in our city that I do not have relationships with. And so I really have to really work hard at not only creating a relationship with those people, but finding out what's important to them and find out how they expect to be served by law enforcement and by the sheriff's department. When it comes to our Hispanic community, we really have a large Hispanic community and Spanish speaking community. And so we want to make sure that we have a bilingual unit, right, that is able to communicate with those people so that they feel comfortable reporting crimes, testifying on behalf of victims and being witnesses. We have a responsibility to do that. And communication is a barrier, but we can solve that. We can solve that just by creating units and access and looking all of our forms to make sure that they can be read by everybody that is members of our community, that they know how to access and communicate with people that do not speak the same language as they do. And then figure out that we are not unconsciously doing things to harm or hurt their culture, right? That we wouldn't do. And so all that is education and that's training. And so I will be leaning on our community to let us know what we're missing and to help us learn what we ought to know.
You've got an opponent. Why should people vote for you and not for him?
Right. So I would say back this whole conversation up and listen to what I've just said, is because we have a vast difference in experience. We have a young man who's an officer in Norman, has never served in Oklahoma County at all. He's never supervised at his own agency. He's no leadership skills to speak of. And we cannot look at the job that we have right now. And your first job in leadership is the top job. You have too much at stake. We're at a pivotal point in law enforcement right now where we really have to reimagine what law enforcement is and what law enforcement means. And so I always think about that first-time teacher, that first-year teacher. They have all the skills, they have all the knowledge, but their first year of teaching, every last one of them tells me is a wreck because they've never led before. They've never led a classroom before. Well, here we are. We have a police officer who has done police work, but he's never led, right? And he's never done it in the context of Oklahoma County. He doesn't have the relationships. He doesn't have those things to be able to lean on in crisis, like we just talked about. Doesn't have investigation experience at all, right? And I'm not saying he's not a good guy. I really believe from what I've seen, he is a good guy. But what we're asking right now for voters is not only a good guy, but somebody that's good for the job, right? And so we have to look at their resume. We have to look at my resume. We have to look at our experience. We have to look at the trust and the equity that's been built up in and around our county and believe this person can pick up right now and carry out a vision of building trust in the community and legitimacy and producing fair and impartial policing the way that we expect it to be done.
As you've been introducing yourself, you've got a long tenure. Describe or give us kind of a timeline of your experience.
So in 1996, I started in Guthrie, Oklahoma as a patrolman. And I was there for a year and a half, and then I transferred to the city of Moore, where I was also a patrolman. I did that for a year and a half. And in 1999, I came over to Oklahoma City, went through the academy, and came out as a patrolman.
Okay.
I stayed as a patrolman there probably for just a couple of years before I was asked to become a field training officer. And a field training officer is where you are seen as a stellar police officer with sound tactics and patrol tactics, and they want you to train the next class of rookies coming out. So I went on to become a field training officer and trained, 10 or 15 different rookies and put them into the street. And then around 2003 or 4, I promoted to sergeant and went into a street crimes narcotics unit where we investigated a variety of different street level crimes, from narcotics to stolen property to serious gang investigations, extortion, guns and drugs, right? So during that time, I've learned how to establish probable cause, put together affidavits, and I've served over 300 high-risk warrants in all over Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County. Of course, that comes with learning how to investigate and testify in court, put together and work with the DA's office on appropriate charges, right? And doing that not only at the state and local level, but also in federal court. I then promoted, while in that unit, I was recognized by the chief of police for my community service that I was doing on my off time and working with community and youth in the community, at-risk youth in the community. And he asked me if I would step away from narcotic investigations and move in to create a gang prevention program, which did not exist. And so I was placed into the criminal intelligence units to investigate what other police departments around the country were doing with youth and trying to keep kids in school and also deter them from joining gangs. And that was at the time when we had the largest amount of drive-by shootings in Oklahoma City than we had in our history. It was up to about 170 different drive-by shootings on both and primarily north, east, and south side of Oklahoma City. So what I did is I created a gang prevention program. It was a program of one person, me, that went out, targeted youth that were in trouble of dropping out of school because of truancy, offering them mentorship with partners from faith-based organizations from around the city. And it turned out to be so successful that the city of Oklahoma City granted us 2 community centers, one on the northeast side, one on the south side. And I'm happy to say, I can give you a long story on all the programs and all of the outreach things that I created to do that. But to make a long story short, that program, that unit is now 4 full-time police officers, me, the supervisor, which was promoted to lieutenant during that tenure, and then 2 civilian. And so we've been around for 13 years in serving that. And I guess one of our claim to fame is we've been asked to present at the National Mentoring Conference in Washington, D.C. for the work that we've done in building community trust and reducing juvenile crime in our area. So I'm really, really proud of that. And of course, you cannot build programs like that without support from your top administration and support from civic leaders and community leaders from across the city, because there's no money for that. So you have to manage a nonprofit. So that's one of the claims to fame, is I had to build a nonprofit and manage a nonprofit in order to be able to serve kids outside of the police department the way that we do. So vast amount of experience in doing that. And then of course, supervising on the street, men in uniform, men and women in uniform, investigating use of force incidents, also investigating complaints on officers. Like when citizens have a complaint, that comes to the supervisor. The supervisor has to ascertain whether a crime was committed by the officer, whether the complaint was valid. That goes with reviewing body-worn camera footage and find out if there's any policy violations, and working that all the way up and administering the proper consequence for failures to follow policy or law. And so, as you can imagine, I'm really trying to be really, really fast to let you know that law enforcement, all aspects of it, as you can find it all through my experience since 1996.
Is there anything else that you feel like people need to take into consideration when they decide on how they're going to vote, or any topic that I haven't covered that you feel like needs to be addressed?
We have the narrative is saying that we need to be a law and order leader. And I don't know a law enforcement professional that is not for law and order. And when we talk about law and order, I want people to start really just dissect that a little bit. There's law we all agree with, and there's order that we all agree with, but that and in between, right? That and that leads to disorder, right? We need a leader that understands that poverty, we understand that untreated trauma, we understand that education and lack of education, access to resources, access to mental health treatment, all of those things, right, that intersect with law and order. We need a leader that understands the and, right? So that we can all produce the law and order that we all strive to have. We all want to feel safe and secure in our homes, but we can't have law order. We have to have law and order. And so we need a candidate that can hold people accountable and have compassion at the same time, right? It is not an and an order. It is the same thing. And that's what I represent. And that's how I reimagine law enforcement. And I just ask everybody to take a very, very detailed look at both candidates to see who is going to be able to produce the law and order that we all are asking for. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.